How's it going? My name's Dim, and in this episode we will be sprucing up our front end with some CSS. In the last episode, we just created the scaffolding for our front end. Now let's make it look nice. First things first, let's get a good font. Head over to Google Fonts and pick whichever one you like. For me, that's Roboto, so we'll select the regular Roboto font and copy the HTML code to our head. Let's also give our page a title other than document while we're at it. Now let's create our CSS file and use it in the head. Going into our CSS files, let's use the star selector to select everything. We can copy and paste the CSS from Google Fonts. Now let's make our profile look like we wanted it to. We'll do that by giving it a position of fixed. Let's set the top and left to 0 so it sticks to the top left corner. Let's give it some padding, say 5 pixels, so the text won't just be hugging the edges. Let's give it a background color so that it stands out from the rest of the page. Here, we'll just use black. Let's give it a border bottom right radius so the bottom right of the box is rounded. That ends up not working because profile is a class and not an ID. Whoops, let's change that. Now, we can see something. But our text is not visible. Let's make the color white so we can see our text. That seems to be what we want. Let's just tweak some options to make it look a bit nicer. I feel like more padding is needed and also a background color that's closer to gray than just pure black. Not bad. Let's also set the cursor to pointer so that when a user hovers over it, it's more obvious that our element is clickable. That looks better. Now let's add some styling when a user hovers over the profile. Let's just make the text color darker. Here I randomly decided I wanted the JS code to be in its own file, so I'm doing just that, creating an index.js file and including it in the script tag. Back to styling now. I actually want the name to stay the same color and the login/out button to change color. I also want the hover to make the color brighter rather than darker. To achieve this, we change the non-hover color to #DDD and the hover color to pure white #FFF. Now let's make the name pure white. That looks good, but I want the login/out button to be a bit darker, so let's make it CCC. I'm pretty happy with that. Let's move on from the profile styling. Now, our main class is basically a container, so let's give it a width of 80% and a margin of 0 auto, so the element gets horizontally centered. Let's actually change that margin to 50 pixels auto, so that it has 50 pixels of space on the top and bottom. Now, here I noticed that the body has a default margin of 8 pixels, so I add some CSS to get rid of that. One thing I want to do here is make it so that on mobile the container takes up the full width rather than just 80%. To do this, we can use the CSS media query and in the parentheses write max width 480 pixels. Anything we write in this media query will only take effect when the user's screen width is less than or equal to 480 pixels. Here, let's make our main class 95%. I don't want to do 100% because I still want some gap on the sides. Let's add a max width of 1280 pixels to our container, just in the off chance that someone views our website on a super wide screen. Now let's get to styling our file input. This is a bit challenging because you don't have much customization with the default input element, so we need a hack involving labels to get around this behavior. Let's create a label with the for attribute set to upload. Here, I'm adding a name attribute to the input, but you don't have to do that, and I'll remove it later. Let's write some text in our label. And in our CSS, let's set our upload element to display none. Let's test that out. When we click it, we can select the file to upload. Let's modify our JavaScript file so that the active class is set to the upload button rather than the input element. To do this, we select our element by using getElementById. And instead of accessing box.classList, we access uploadButton.classList. Hold on, let's test out drag and drop. Oh, that doesn't work. This Stack Overflow answer seems pretty promising. Let's go ahead and rearrange some of our HTML and put that text in a span element. Well, let's just try copying their CSS and see what happens. I will link the Stack Overflow answer in the description, by the way. Let's just modify some of the CSS so it works with our class and ID names. That seems good. Let's modify our JavaScript once more and make sure that active class is showing up. That's good too. Now with that CSS in place, let's do some of our own styling. First, let's make the width 100% and the height 300 pixels. Let's also set a max width property of 480 pixels so our upload box doesn't get super wide. I want everything to be centered, so let's go to our main element and add display flex, align item center, and flex direction column. I noticed the selector we were using here was wrong, so let's change that. Oh, that's what it's supposed to look like. That's really nice actually. I think I'll be keeping this upload box the way it is. Let's just add some styling when the active class is there. The thing I want to focus on is the background color. Let's just make it a bit darker when the element is active. How about rather than some text we use an icon? Here you can see me going to Icon Monster. It's a really good resource for free icons that you can easily embed in your page. I'll leave a link to it in the description. Let's search for an upload icon. This one looks good, so let's click embed and copy. With that copied, let's replace our text with that icon. It works, but I want the icon to be bigger. To do this, we can change the width and height to 80 and see what it looks like. That's about it for our upload box. Now let's make our file list look better. Let's first make each file take its own line. We can do this by setting display to flex and flex direction to column. It's an ID, not a class. Anyway, we did that, but now even our delete buttons get their own line. Well, when you look at the HTML in the DevTools panel, it's because we aren't grouping the anchor and the span element together. So let's go back to our JavaScript and change that. Let's just wrap these two elements in a div and try again. That's good, but I want our file name on the far left and our delete button on the far right. I try to do this by setting the div elements in our files div to width 100%. Setting the files div itself to 100% does fix it, but that looks pretty ugly. And it would look even uglier when the delete button is all the way on the right. Instead, what we're going to do is make the file and delete button line up with the upload box. To do this, let's remove these two properties and change the max width of our main div to 480 pixel. Let's set the width of upload label to 100% again. Let's give our files div width 100%. Here I try adding some padding to the files, but it doesn't seem to work for the horizontal padding. For that though, we can add padding to the divs instead. Let's still add some vertical padding with padding 5 pixel 0. I changed the padding of the divs to 0.5 pixels because I just want the divs to have horizontal padding. Now let's separate the delete button from the file name. In this div, let's set display flex and justify content space between. And that works like a charm. Now I don't really like this delete text, so let's do the same thing we did before and go to Icon Monster for a delete icon. I like this one, so let's copy the inline HTML and paste it into our HTML inside of our JavaScript file here. Let's add that onClick property to it as well so it still deletes the file. Well, that's a little too big. Let's go back to our width and height property. I'm guessing 24 would work. That looks good, but let's add a class so that we can do some styling. First off, I want our cursor to be pointer to make it clear that it can be pressed. Then I want some sort of change in color when we hover. Let's set our default color and hover color. Let's actually change the colors since we don't want white on white. And nothing is happening. Well, it seems like there is no fill attribute on the SVG element, so let's add fill equals current color and see what happens. And now that works. That's done, so now let's go back and add some finishing touches. First off, I want the file input to be cursor pointer so that it's clear to the user that you can upload files. I'm not sure what exactly happened, but I just ended up adding the cursor pointer to the upload div and that worked. Now let's make sure our trash icons and the text on the left are vertically centered with the align item center. I do want to style these anchor tags because I don't think default anchor tags look very good, so let's change their color to something dark. Let's also make it so that when you hover, the color becomes full black. Let's make the default color a bit brighter. Let's also get rid of the default underline with the text decoration none. I do want it when you hover, so add text decoration underline to the hover style. A small feature I do here is add width 100% to these anchor tags so that you can click anywhere between the text and the garbage can to select the file. I tested out the application some more and noticed that when uploading files while signed out and then signing in, the file's order changes. I wanted the files to have consistent ordering, so I went back to the backend code. Here in our get/files endpoint, we are fetching a number of files but in no particular order. Let's instead order by the created _@ timestamp and use descending order so the newest file is always first. Now that's a file uploading service I'm pretty happy with. I think this is a good stopping point and maybe even the last episode. I think we really touched on the most important parts of building a file storage web application. I hope that since you've come this far, you've at least learned a thing or two and continue to expand on this project on your own. In this episode, we went from this to this, which is pretty amazing. All the code will be in the description in the GitHub repository, so feel free to compare it with your own or build something from my code. Thank you so much for watching, and peace out for now.